Alrighty, good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. I hope you had a peaceful and relaxing break, or at least, if not, you had to work. I hope you got some work done, and so you're ahead of the game. Please remember that quiz number 3 is this Friday. So I already have uploaded it, so it's ready to go for Friday. So then you have a week to take it, so just be aware of that. Okay? All right. Let's get started. We're still talking about the ethical and religious directives for Catholic healthcare services, the ERD. And let's see, where do we stop off? I think I was still talking about human dignity and sacredness of life. And let me just see here where sanctity is where I stopped off on the PowerPoint. So, okay. All right, I'm going to talk about that. No, not coming. Okay, so I'm on the right PowerPoint slide. Okay, good. Let's start. All right. Human life. Why is human life sacred? Well, because we talked about this with sanctity and holiness, the state of being dedicated to a supernatural being. And if the belief is that human life comes ultimately from God, God is a sacred being, is a supernatural being, and hence human life has a sacred source. So human life, it's logical to say, is sacred because it comes from a supernatural source, namely God. In other words, it's another way of saying that human life originates in a sacred being who is God himself, who imparts his own life to the human being. Another way you could say this is that God gives the human being existence. God is the source of existence. And that's, you can use different words. You could say higher being, supreme being, God. These are all just words and concepts that we use to discuss this thing that, the being, I should say, ultimate being, that is the source of all existence in itself. Okay, it's existence itself. Which is basically what God is. His nature is to be and be the source of existence. And there are other things that are part of that. Part of being his existence and his nature is love, care, kindness. These are mercy. These are other attributes of God that are part of what makes him what he is. But ultimately, God is the source of existence, of life, what we can call life. So man does not just exist materially as any other creature does. He is an image, but also shares in God's own existence and life. Ms. Mitchell. To say that man or human beings are the image and likeness of God. Yes, we are an image. We are a material image. We exist materially, physically. We are an image, but we also share in God's own existence and life. And we are also, that's how we are a likeness to God. We are like God in that way. So as God is holy, that is, he is set apart from all created things, of which he is the source. Okay, God is not created things, which is not necessarily obvious. There are religions that think that the physical world and God are the same thing, but Christianity and Judaism do not see it that way. God is the creator, and there's creation, and they're not one and the same. So God is apart from created things. He is, in that way, sacred, set apart. Remember, that's what the word sacred is meant to, holiness is meant to show, that something is set apart from the normal and the everyday. He is set apart from sacred things of which he is the source. So also is human life set apart from other forms of life, sacred, because there are other living things. The plants out there are alive. They are animate, we could say. Okay, other animals are alive and animate. But we wouldn't, from a Christian or a Catholic perspective, say that they are sacred. They're maybe sacred in the sense that they are created by God, Okay, so we have a special obligation to treat them a certain way. And there is a part of bioethics is environmental ethics, but also animal ethics, which I don't talk too much about. I'm focusing more on medical stuff. But nevertheless, there's still two components that people see as part of bioethics: how we treat animals and how we treat the environment. So they extend this idea of sacredness of life even to that. Whereas for the normative principles of Catholic bioethics, it would be more restricted to the human person. The human person is sacred and set apart from other forms of life, of which there are many. But we seem to know, even if you're not a religious person, there's something, even if you won't call it sacred, that there's something special about human life apart from, say, other animal life or from plant life, or other things that maybe we could also say are life, like black holes or whatever. So human life is sacred because, why is human life sacred? Because humans can choose to be and act like God. To be like God and act like God does. And so, for example, according to, this is one of our readings later on about euthanasia, this document called Jura et Bona. Take the first two Latin words of this document, but it's the Declaration on Euthanasia by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. I forget what year they put this out. I should have written it down. Oh, well. Doesn't matter. But they just had this statement in the process of talking about euthanasia. They open up by talking about human life and why it's valuable. And human life is the basis of all goods. Okay, so they're using the word goods in the sense of perfection, something that's perfective, makes better. Okay, and it's the basis for it because you have to be alive to experience it. If you're dead, even an atheist will tell you when you're dead, it's like turning off a radio. You're gone. There's nothing. You're nothing there anymore to experience anything. So maybe you shouldn't be afraid of death. Okay, but it's kind of like the same view for a Christian or Catholic view. When you're dead, you can't experience these things anymore until, of course, the soul is reunited with the body in the resurrection. But human life is the basis for all goods and is the necessary source and condition of every human activity and of all society. You got to be alive to do it, to do things. Most people regard life as something sacred and hold that no one may dispose of it at will. Okay, so you can't just take someone's life on your own decision or choice, even take your own life on your own decision and choice. A lot of cultures see that, even if they don't have maybe a reason for it, they see even suicide as something maybe you shouldn't do. But believers see in life something greater, namely a gift of God's love, which they are called upon to preserve and make fruitful. So it's an elevated view. It's not just that we got the luck of the draw, we got the lucky card out of the evolutionary card deck, and we're alive, which is true, which is a good thing. I would hope we would see that as a good thing. But we're elevated because we have this other view that the life has been specifically given to us by God. God wanted you to exist. Think about that. God wanted you to exist specifically, not just, God bless you, not just wanted you in a theoretical sense, a philosophical sense, but wanted you to exist at this time and place, this specific time and place, specifically the way you are, with the gifts that you have and the things that you're going to do. Okay, so moving on to the next point, which is care for the poor. Care for the poor is an essential aspect of the normative principles for Catholic healthcare ethics because it flows out of the dignity of the human person. And part of respecting the dignity of the human person is respecting those who are most vulnerable and in need of help. Okay? And we kind of know this from our own practical experience. We know when certain people, when they're vulnerable, they're in need of more help. Otherwise, you can kind of leave them alone. You can say, okay, someone's doing fine. You don't have to worry about them or whatever. But if someone is vulnerable, someone's suffering, you check in on them. You just naturally have this sense of you got to do more for that person because they are vulnerable and hurting. And it's the same thing for people who are poor. Usually the poor are suffering from Well, of course, they're poor. They don't have a lot of money or resources, but they don't have those resources to take care of themselves. And so notice they start out by saying the biblical mandate. So they're starting out from Revelation. Okay, it's not necessarily obvious that you should take care of the poor. Some people might have the view, well, leave them to themselves. They should pick themselves up by their own bootstraps and make things work and become rich or become not poor, But the ethical directive here starts from Revelation. It starts from what the Bible commands, that care for the poor requires us to express this. The Bible commands that care for the poor is required to be expressed in this concrete action at all levels of Catholic health care. Okay, so it's not necessarily flowing from human reason or human practice, because you can have people who argue that the poor just they're in their own lot, they've made their own bed, and they should just either get used to it. That's the way they were made to be, which some cultures have that view. You're born into a certain level of society, and that's where you are. Or it's their own fault. They just haven't worked hard enough or been ambitious enough. Or it's not their fault, and they should just work themselves out of poverty. Sometimes you can't work yourself out of poverty. You need help. And so this mandate prompts us to work to ensure that our country's healthcare delivery system provides adequate healthcare to the poor. In Catholic institutions, particular attention should be given to the healthcare needs of the poor, the uninsured, and the underinsured. So here they kind of broaden the net here. It's not just those who are poor, but people who might be on the margins of poverty, but people even in the middle class, people who you might say are not truly impoverished, but they're in the middle class who don't have adequate insurance. So that is also a concern. It's not like they're not concerned about that. An example, just to give you an example of the biblical mandate, the commands, because they don't cite anything, so I had to look in my own Bible. I know there's stuff there. There are various things. So I just chose one thing from this book called the Book of Deuteronomy, which is part of the law that the Jews have. The Book of Deuteronomy is basically Moses kind of standing on a plain of ground and talking and speaking the laws that God has given him to the Jews. So if you're curious about what kind of laws the Jews are supposed to follow, you can look in the book of Deuteronomy, one of the books. There are other books with laws in it, but the Book of Deuteronomy. And in fact, the name Deuteronomy means second law. Deuteros, second, nomos, law. So the second law, because there's another book of the law that's there. But in that book, in chapter 15, Moses says to the people, if one of your kinsmen, your relatives, people, part of your people, is in need of any community and is in need in any community in the land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or close your hand against your kin who is in need. Instead, you shall freely open your hand and generously lend what suffices to meet that need. Okay, so in need means poverty, and the person has I'm interpreting it as poverty, but if a person is in need of some benefit, you should not close your heart to the person, but open it and help. And so this is part of the biblical command of taking care of people who are poor, who are in need. Okay, so this concern for the poor expresses itself in the principle of solidarity. Solidarity, which comes from a Latin word solidum, comes through the French solidarité, but Latin solidum, which means a whole sum, having it all together, the whole amount of money, a whole sum of money. And solidarity kind of means that it's a quality of unity based on the interests, objectives, and standards of a community. So a coming together, basically a standing together against something. In this case, it's against suffering and illness. which is what's going on. The church stands in solidarity with the poor in treating their suffering caused by sickness or illness. Another way you could describe solidarity is friendship. It's another word for friendship. And sometimes it's also called social charity. Read that on the board. According to Donald Condit in his article, Catholic Social Teaching Precepts for Healthcare Reform, this is in the Linacre Quarterly, which is a medical journal, a Catholic medical journal, I believe. I forget which Catholic group it's the journal for, but anyways, and he was writing this article about how Catholic social teaching could be applied to reforming the healthcare system in the United States. But he talks about this principle of solidarity, and he says solidarity reflects Christ's command to love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, so remember, this is the greatest commandment. We see this actualization of it in solidarity. And the obligation to seek the good of others. We ought to love our neighbor, feed the poor, clothe the naked, and care for the sick. Solidarity compels Christians to love and care not only for those closest to us, for example, friends and family, but also for all humanity. Okay, so remember, it's a unity based on the common interests or the interests, objectives, and standards of a community. So these are common interests. It's a common interest that all people, but especially those most vulnerable, should have health care and have their health care needs met. Don't know if I put that on the PowerPoint, did I? I did. Well, whatever. I did, so I'll read it. This is from the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, which is a council within the Vatican, although a few years ago they reshuffled the offices in the Vatican. I don't know if it's called the Pontifical Council anymore. It might be called a dicastery, but anyways, and it might have been, might not even exist anymore. No, I think it exists. But the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace put out a compendium of the social doctrine of the church. This is how the church's teachings are related to society, its role in society, and how societies of people organize themselves. And you can find this online. If you just search for the compendium of the social doctrine of the church, it's online. And what I just told you about the common good, this is just a quote that I thought highlighted that. Solidarity highlights in a particular way the intrinsic social nature of the human person, that we're not in this alone, and the equality of all in dignity and rights, and the common path of individuals and peoples towards an even more committed unity. So solidarity is not just, it's a general principle of our common dignity as human beings and our unity as human beings and our common goals like peace. In this case, I'm talking about health, but these can also be goals such as peace in the world, which God knows we need, especially with recent events in the Middle East and still going on in places like the Ukraine. I shouldn't say the Ukraine, excuse me. So why is this a common good, or what is a part of our common human nature? Because this is based on the Christian responsibility of loving your neighbor extends to all. Love your neighbor is an absolute. It extends to all. And so but it mostly includes the vulnerable, but extends to all people. Solidarity is connected to justice, since it is committed to giving each and every person what is his or her due. What each person deserves based on their dignity. And it's part of caring for the poor is showing in a special way their human dignity, that they should not be ignored. The people who are most vulnerable and most in need of help must not be ignored, and their needs must not be ignored. What does solidarity mean? And, I'm not to that quote yet. Solidarity, and this I'm getting this from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which there's a link on the modules page for the Catechism of the Catholic Church in case you want to look this up. Abbreviated CCC, 1939, paragraph or section number 1939 to 1940, where it talks about solidarity and what it means. Solidarity comes from our common origin in God. And the unity, not just our common origin in God, but the unity of our rational nature, of humanity's rational nature. Solidarity finds its seal in Christ's sacrifice on the cross, since he bore the sins of all and died for all. The view is not Jesus didn't just die for Christians, he died for all people, so it's a universal action, and it binds us also in solidarity. It's part of our general interest to be saved. Solidarity also means the distribution of goods and the remuneration for work. So distribution of health care to those who are most in need of it, i.e. the sick. And solidarity might have implications for me because out of solidarity, for example, I might forego a normal checkup in favor of someone who has a grave illness and needs to see the doctor first. It's kind of this idea of you first. Solidarity compels me or motivates me to think of the good of the other person, the interest of the other person. Someone might have a greater need for health care than I have it. The Church's vision of solidarity extends especially to the poor, to the outcast, to the marginalized, those who are especially in need of it. And here's another quote from the Bible. This is from the New Testament. The other quote was from Deuteronomy in the Old Testament. This is from the letter of James. Don't ask me who James was. We don't know exactly who this man James was who wrote the letter. Modern scholars think the consensus is that it's probably one of the relatives of Jesus, a brother of the Lord, as he's called. So take it for what it's worth. But anyways, the letter of James, it's an interesting little letter because it's a very ethical letter. It's basically concerned with ethics and how Christians should treat each other. And he says, writing to whoever he was writing to, he doesn't even specify to which group he was writing to. We don't know where. But what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? You say you're a believer, but you don't act on it. Can that faith save him? If a brother or sister has nothing to wear and has no food for the day, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm and eat well," but you do not give them the necessities of the body, what good is it? So also faith of itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So it's not enough. Excuse me. God bless you. God bless you. So it's not enough. You could just say, well, keep your faith in the churches, keep your faith in the synagogues, keep your faith in the mosques. But it's not enough because there is this demand, this command of Scripture, this understanding that faith simply, it needs to extend itself in works outside. It needs to be active. It needs to be expressed. And these are again, the works that Jesus did, which were works of love and mercy towards others. And so James says that if you don't do this, your faith is dead. It's just something you profess, and you say hallelujah in church on Sunday, or maybe Saturday if you're a Seventh-day Adventist, but it doesn't really extend into your into life outside of that. So that's why there are Catholic hospitals, that's why there are Catholic schools, there are Catholic nursing homes, there are Catholic daycare centers. They're extending out this command of, if you see your brother and sister in need, you have to address the need. Okay, sir, Mr. Thomas. Why are the poor so vulnerable? Because it's often the poor that are it's often the poor that are uninsured and least able to pay for the service of health care. And so the U.S. Catholic bishops, in a pastoral letter, I told you pastoral means shepherding, so a letter where the bishops are engaged in teaching. They wrote a letter in 1986 called Economic Justice for All. Oh, I talked about triage. Whoops, I guess I didn't put that there. Whoops. Maybe I'll skip over the quote. I think I made my point with the poor. Okay, I'll skip over that quote. Solidarity undergirds the principle of triage. To relate it to medical ethics or to medicine, triage is the act of sorting patients according to the urgency of their needs. From the French word trier, to sort or sift. Which is a kind of form of love, if you think about it. Not just Christian love, but just basic love. You first. Again, this idea of you first. You are in greater need than I am. That's kind of like what's going on with triage. This person is in greater need, medical need, than you are, and so this person needs to get in to see a medical professional first. It's an act of solidarity. You're recognizing the interests of those who are part of the community. There are people who have more severe, more urgent interests than you might have. So I'm confusing the word actualize, but we put this into evidence in practices like triaging people, as well. And it's also an efficiency standard. It's just. But why is it based on the greatest need? Because of human dignity. The person who's suffering the most needs to be treated first, rather than the person who's not suffering as much. We recognize that we recognize the evil of suffering and that it needs to be tended to immediately in some cases, and maybe not so immediately in others. It's an actuation of what we call the common good, which is another normative principle of Catholic healthcare, of the ethical and religious directives. We're seeking to serve the common good. And this is a quote from the ethical and religious directives of Catholic healthcare services. The common good is realized when economic, political, and social conditions ensure protection for the fundamental rights of all individuals and enable all to fulfill their common purpose and reach their common goals. Okay. Common good and common goals. Remember, I've used this word good before. We have the good, which is what ultimately benefits the human person, and goods, which are things that are perfective, and you could also say beneficial to the human person. They perfect our nature, our essence, what we are as human beings. They make us better. Okay, and that's what basically is going on with the common good. There are goods that are common to our human nature that we want to encourage, and healthcare ministry does that, and should do that. Should contribute to that common good, which is health, the lack of wholeness, which is the lack of illness and sickness, or at least wholeness as much as you can have it, because someone might still have some residue of sickness and whatever. The common good, if you want a definition of it, is the totality of social conditions that allow people, whether as a group or as an individual, to reach their own fulfillment. So flourishing, well-being. And this is not a unique concept to Christianity or Catholicism, okay? Philosophers talk about the common good, and we'll debate what is the common good. What are the goods that are common to our human nature? But I think most, if not all, would agree, whether you're religious or not religious, would agree that health is a good of the human person. It seems just obvious because we have buildings committed to, we have whole institutions committed to this common good of healthcare, of caring for health. We even have it for animals. We care so much about other animals and other life forms that we have it for them. I mean, we have tree doctors, so even we have people who do treat trees that are sick. So, I mean, we see this as something that is, that is fulfilling us in some way. Did I do that? Gaudium is space number 26. I wonder why I put that there, but I think it talks about the common good. But all right, well, I'll put it on the board. I mean, there's a... no, I won't put it on the board. It doesn't matter. The Catechism of the Catholic Church. Of course, the Catholic Church has a view of the common good, which is our ultimate fulfillment is in God. And healthcare is a way of achieving that. It's not just a bodily enterprise where we're working on the material physicality of the human person, although we're doing that. But there's something also that's going on with the person we can call the soul, or the spirit, or the spiritual aspect of the person that is also coming into play. And you might find this in your nursing careers, or your physical therapy careers, or your radiological careers, where you're treating a patient, but the patient starts asking you questions that are not medical. You might call them philosophical, like, where am I going after this? Do you think I'm going to go anywhere? Is there any purpose to me continuing with this treatment? And they're really asking you kind of life questions. They're asking you heavy questions about, what's the purpose of suffering? Why does my child have cancer? They're not asking you about treating the cancer. They know you can do that, and maybe you'll be successful. They're asking larger questions about questions of evil, stuff like that, which are philosophical questions, yes, but also more often than not are dealt with in religions. So they're kind of tiptoeing into religious. When they're asking you about an afterlife, like they're going to go into major surgery and someone's scared, and it's like, where am I going to go if I don't come out of this? Who's going to take care of my family? How will I be remembered? No one will remember me. These are questions that are beyond. These are questions beyond just dealing with the material elements, sticking an IV in their vein, giving them a medication, something like that, a treatment. These will come up because you're dealing with, try it or not, whether you're an atheist or not, an atheist, an agnostic, or a believer in something, these are, for some reason, healthcare, and when you're confronting death and sickness, and these bring up ultimate questions that people are going to ask you. And they're going to see you as an authority because you deal with this all the time. So the common good presupposes respect for the person as such, that there is a respect for the human person. And this respect is based, of course, in human dignity and the creation by God. Now, you don't have to believe in a God to believe in human respect. I mean, you have statements by, the World Health Organization or the United Nations about, the dignity of human rights and stuff like that. But they don't, since, they're not going to say it's a God that gives this, what do they back it up with? You have to look at what is the principle backing it. Is it just simply that we're the human species and we're the best of the humans, we're the best of the species because we can rationalize and conceptualize, and we're the most powerful species because we've taken over the planet? Is it simply that gives us our dignity? Why should we respect human persons as such? The answer to that question will determine your bioethics, will determine how what you do to the human person. Think of when I did the history of bioethics and talked a little bit about like the Nazi experiments, or the experiments done by, was it Unit 731, a Japanese army unit, I think, or the Tuskegee experiments and stuff like that. And I could name other experiments that the U.S. military did on servicemen, stuff without their consent. Why was that so shocking to people? Because it somehow violated a respect for the human person as such, even though people might not be able to articulate why the human person is so special. But from a Catholic perspective, every person has a vocation, a calling in life from God, which society is bound to respect. That's why society can't just treat you any way it wants to treat you. Society can't manipulate the human person. No society, not our society, not a communist society, a totalitarian regime, a fascist regime, it doesn't matter. It's even a democracy. The society is bound to respect the calling that we've received from God. We didn't get it from the U.S. Congress or from the President of the United States. We got our calling from God ultimately when He created us. And so society should create the conditions for the exercise of our natural freedoms that are indispensable for the development of our vocation and calling, which we see in societies that work. We see this happening. Like you're here taking a bioethics course, part of your program of study for nursing or healthcare professions or social work or whatever, or you're just taking it because you want to, but a lot of you have to take it because it's part of your program. So we see that, you're exercising your natural freedom to develop your vocation and calling. In other societies, maybe not. In Afghanistan, the women wouldn't be here in this course because I think it's after 6th grade or something, women are not allowed to go to school anymore. So that's a case where a society is choosing to interfere in the freedom that allows these women to develop their calling in life, whatever it might be. So what does this mean for us? It means, for example, that we can act according to our consciences. Our consciences should be respected. I'll talk about conscience in a later class. Our privacy is safeguarded. We have a right to privacy, to be left alone. If we want to be freedom in religious matters, in the way that we relate to God. But the common good also requires the social well-being and development of the group. No one exists alone. And society does have a role to play because society must arbitrate amongst the various particular interests of the group. So, for quoting from, this is actually from 1939. Whoops, sorry about that. Why did I put that up there? Oh, I put that up there from before. If you wanted, the common good is 1906 to 1909 in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. I just forgot to write it on the board. 1906, section 1906 to 1909, Niner. And in 1907, it says, quote, society should make accessible to each person what is needed to lead a truly human life. Food, clothing, health, work, education and culture, suitable information. This would be like freedom of the press, the right to establish a family, and so on. The common good also requires peace, the stability and security of a just order. When you have injustice, oftentimes you don't have peace because people are angry. They know they're not being treated the way they should be treated, and that they're not being given what is due them as human beings, and so they erupt. And we see this throughout the world. That's not to justify actions that people might, that's not to justify, say, violent actions that people might take against other people, especially against innocents, but it is an explanation. When you don't have justice, you don't have peace. And peace we need that stability and that security, kind of just so you can organize your life. If you don't have that stability and security, you can't organize your life. Like I lived for 9 months in a third world country, Papua New Guinea. which was generally a peaceful country in the sense that the government wasn't like oppressing anybody, but the government was also corrupt and incompetent. So there were very few services, certainly very few services in healthcare. If you got, God forbid you got bitten by a snake or something where I live, because you'd be dead. They wouldn't get you to the hospital fast enough. And there wouldn't be any ambulances anyways to get you there. You'd have to rely on someone to throw you in a car and take you. But I mean, even at the provincial hospital, Port Moresby General Hospital in the capital, basically, people get there early in the day. You line up. They take your name. Once they fill up the chart, that's it. That's all the people they can see, and the rest can have to go away and come another day, no matter what condition they have, whether it's a serious condition or not. It's first come, first served. But so because it was peaceful, again, in the sense that the government wasn't a dictatorship or a totalitarian regime, but it wasn't peaceful in the sense that it wasn't stable. You couldn't organize your life around it. It wasn't secure. You had to have a cage around your buildings that you lived in because people would steal your stuff at the drop of a hat, which you can understand because a lot of them are poor, but some of them are not poor. They're just thieves. But that wasn't there. We have the benefit that you can plan and live a life here from beginning to end because we have a peaceful society. We should be grateful for that. That quotation here. Oh yeah, I did put that on the PowerPoint. Okay, so I read it to you already from 1907. Well, again, from Condit's article, he just mentions the common good and recognizes that the communities we form as human and social beings with individual rights and responsibilities to respected and upheld, that it is the common good, but it's not a collective, okay, in the sense that individual rights are to be respected and taken into account because of the individual human person. And that requires prudence, that requires tolerance, because not everyone agrees in the same way on the same issues. And it can create tensions, but by tolerance we can hopefully resolve those, and by respecting each other's dignity and the right that people have to form their own consciences and be responsible decision makers, we respect that. Don't want to get ahead of myself. Make sure I get enough done. I think I get the subsidiarity, but I don't know if I get the subsidiarity. Well, we'll see. The next principle is stewardship. Responsible stewardship. Catholic healthcare ministry exercises responsible stewardship of healthcare resources. A just healthcare system will be concerned both with promoting equity of care to assure that the right of each person to basic healthcare is respected, and with promoting the good health of all in the community. The responsible stewardship of healthcare resources can be accomplished best in dialogue with people from all levels of society, in accordance with the principle of subsidiarity, which I'll come back to, and with respect for the moral principles that guide institutions and persons. So let's unpack that. What does that mean? Well, first let's get a definition of what they mean by stewardship, or what we mean by stewardship. Stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something that has been entrusted to a person's care. Your parents had stewardship of you as children. Some of you might have children already and have stewardship of them, and when you do have children, you'll have stewardship of them. So you already understand the concept. And as healing professionals, you will have stewardship of your patients and the people who come to you. You will be responsible for them while they are in your care, and you will be expected to take care of them carefully and responsibly. See the Old English word steward, which just means someone who is a caretaker of a hall. So the same kind of idea, someone who's a caretaker. This principle begins again for Catholic stewardship, begins again with acting as God does. God is steward as well. It's an acknowledgement of God as the owner, if you want to put it that way, of everything in creation. Because God created creation, he cares for it and he's responsible for it. His responsibility we call providence in theological language, that God considers because he made you, he has to take care of you, and does. Just by keeping you in existence is taking care of you, but giving me the food I eat every day somehow also takes care of us through other people. We take care of each other. We are also God's hands. These hands are small, I know, but these hands... Any Jewel fans? No? In the end, only kindness matters. No? Jewel? Come on! Well, she was kind of 90s, but all right. Small hands, Jewel, but you can do a lot with them. And just to give you a little scripture quotation, because I gotta, from Psalm 24, "The earth is the Lord's and all it holds, the world and those who dwell in it. For he founded it on the seas and established it over the rivers." So this principle from Revelation that God is the creator, because that's not necessarily obvious. We can reason to a creator. You don't have to be a Catholic or a Christian to reason to the fact that the world has some kind of source. Not necessarily a creator. You could say the earth is always, its source is in eternity, that it's always existed, that it doesn't have a particular point when it was created. But we have Revelation where God can say, yes, no, I made things at a certain point, but it is the Lord's. It is God's possession, and everybody. So it's not just, yes, this is in the Bible, the Jewish scriptures, but it's not, hey, you Jews, it's just you that are mine. It's everybody is God's people. He founded it on the seas. We get into the mythology of the Jewish mythology of how God created the world, because, people looked out at the world and they saw water, a lot of water. And so they thought, you're looking out at the oceans, they knew that water came from above, from the rain, and water came up from below, from the wells, and from the seas. You see the oceans that go down into the deep. And so people just assumed that the whole world was surrounded by water above and water below. We were enclosed in this watery domain, you might say. That's not unusual. Some Native American views of the universe also had that view of, the world being one great, watery mass that was surrounding us. Because how do you explain where the rain comes from? Water from the air, water from above. And how do you explain that if you dig deep enough, water will percolate up from the ground? Oh, there must be water down there. So people rationalized. They didn't understand how the world worked, but they had to explain these things. So God founded the world on the seas, on this primordial sea, on this ocean. Consequently, humans are responsible to God for the wise use of all that's been entrusted to them. That we don't possess anything of our own self. Think about climate change. One of the arguments about climate change is that, what kind of world are we passing on to future generations? We should do something now about it, because it's going to affect future generations and they'll have to deal with it. They will have to deal with it. But hopefully if we do something, they won't have to deal with it as much. So we already kind of recognize, even in a philosophical way, that the world is not our own, that we have an obligation, even if it's to future generations. In this sense, it's an obligation to God for the wise use of the world. And why? To administer the world in a manner that's in keeping with God's intended purpose. God has a purpose for the way he wants the world to be used, and that needs to be respected. Stewardship can be viewed narrowly in the sense of a person's responsibility for his or her own material resources, like money or my possessions. But today, stewardship is understood in a more holistic way. And this is just a quotation from the Pocket Dictionary of Ethics that I found that I thought was helpful. The human managerial responsibility extends to all areas of life, both individual and communal, and includes both attitude and action. Attitude and action, the way I look at things and what I'm going to do about them. Okay? We call this, as James says, faith and works. My attitude and my action, they should go together. As a spiritual principle, stewardship is taught in the Bible. I mean, I've brought you this, but also from the first letter of Peter. Peter could be one of the apostles of Jesus. Most modern scholars don't think so. They think it's just someone using the name of Peter the apostle. But there are people who disagree, and I'd be one of those who disagree. I think it's written by the apostle Peter through a secretary. But anyways, what does he say in chapter 4? He says, each one has received a gift. Use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's very grace. So stewardship is about service. Service. Whoever preaches, let it be with the words of God. Whoever serves, and this applies to people who are going to be in the healing profession because it's a service, let it be with the strength that God supplies, so that in all things God may be glorified through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen. Dominion could be another word of saying kingdom or rule or power. Physicians, nurses, radiologists, physical therapists, social workers, they have all received a gift from God. The healing profession or the social work profession, whatever it is their calling. So your peculiar stewardship is for the sick human being. That's what you're entering into, and that's what you're going to be treating. That's what all your education is about, and your continuing education. It is a calling for you. You are stewards of the life of the people who will think of that, they're placing their lives and their health in your hands, hoping that you will treat them and care for them. Stewardship is a matter of justice. Remember, I highlighted that a little bit when I read it. A just healthcare system. So we have this idea of justice come up. We'll get the subsidiarity in a moment. Stewardship is a matter of justice, which again is giving to each person his or her due. Just as God takes care of me, I can take care of others. So I'm giving them what's due to them. What's due to me, I'm receiving it from God, do unto others as I would have them do unto me. If I'm receiving stewardship from God and taking care of my life, I give that to others out of justice. What does equity of care look like? Well, in the first place, it means serving those who are typically denied care or don't have access to it. Again, the poor, the uninsured. But it also means that everyone who presents himself or herself with an illness or suffering ought to receive treatment, ought not to be turned away. So it should be equal care. It should be, it would be an offense, and it was an offense in the days of, say, Jim Crow laws, that you had hospitals for white people and hospitals that would only take blacks. And so, you would push, say, okay, you can't, if you're a black person, you can't come to the white hospital. That's not equity of care. Or this is a Catholic hospital, so we're only going to treat Catholics, or primarily Catholics will receive health care or benefits of health care, but you say you're not a Catholic, well, you have to pay or something like that. No, it's you're treated the same. It's equity of care. It's equal. It's just. But this view of equity of care also incorporates the common good, this idea of the common good, by extending into the community. So a Catholic healthcare institution should extend into the community by raising health standards, having roving clinics, for example. People can't come to the hospital, bring the hospital to them. Having blood drives, providing flu shots and vaccinations. These are all things which should necessarily should be standard in a healthcare setting anyways, but are not necessarily the case. Not in all places in the world. Certainly in our country, this is not unusual, I don't think. But in other places of the world, it might be. In the church, they should definitely bring the healthcare to the community, which can't come to the healthcare. So stewardship encompasses not just those who come through the door of the ER, the emergency room or urgent care room or whatever they're calling it nowadays, emergent care or whatever, but also the whole community surrounding the healthcare facility. For the optimal stewardship of healthcare resources, the ERD recommends the principle of subsidiarity. And what is this principle? It's a principle of social organization which holds that the functions that are performed effectively by subordinate or local organizations belong more properly to them rather than a dominant central organization. Basically, the idea is that if you can do something efficiently and better at a lower level, then you do it at the lower level. You don't have some higher agency come in and subsume or take over the lower level functions. Okay? The most basic lower level function is the human family. So the government, doesn't, the government does kind of do these things in some ways. But I was going to say, the government doesn't give you food, doesn't go buy your groceries every week, so that because in lieu of your parents, or it doesn't educate you or whatever. Which I had that example in my head. I'm like, well, yeah, the government kind of does in public schools, so it does kind of take over that educational aspect, but it doesn't buy your groceries every week in lieu of your parents. You have to do that. It doesn't raise your kids, by telling them what to do. It's not, have a government agent on the playground telling your kids how to play and how to be and how to react with other people. The parents are there. The parent is there to be that teacher, to be that formator. And that's the lowest level of the basic unit, the family, which socializes you for human life, hopefully socializes you well. Otherwise, you go see a shrink. Anyways, I'm just thinking about my shrink. Nice guy. Oh, what I put him through. Anyways. But then you have your community. If your local community should be better at knowing the needs and what is the needs of the local community and what needs to be done, no pun intended, than a higher authority. Okay, so that's what subsidiarity is talking about. Subsido in Latin means to remain at the bottom, to sit down, literally, to decrease, but to remain at the bottom. You want to give privilege to the bottom levels of the societal structure. Let them handle the situation first before it goes to the higher level. And then the higher level can intervene if the lower levels are overwhelmed and aren't able to handle the situation. And again, this is a principle, it's obvious. This is how our society is basically organized in our federal system. The federal government doesn't take care of everything. The states take care of everything. And then the state doesn't take care of everything. You have your local township, your local borough that takes care of the local level. And then beyond that, the local level basically lets each family or each group, living in their homes take care of what's going on there. That's subsidiarity. You don't have subsidiarity in a country where, say, a totalitarian regime, like, say, North Korea, which would be the most obvious example, where you have the government in basically planning and centrally planning everything and telling everyone what they're going to do with their lives basically every day of their life, which is not an exaggeration. To some extent, it's an exaggeration, but it's not an exaggeration from the videos I've seen of people who have gone to North Korea where, you can't, as a tourist, you can't just go anywhere. You have to have a minder. You have to have someone be with you and explain everything to you. And everything is basically planned by the government. The government has that responsibility of determining, how the schools are run, how families are going to live, when they're going to, what they're going to do during the day. Like, during the day, you're going to come out for exercise. During the day, you're going to come out for a community session, where they praise the great leader of their country and stuff like that. They do these things. I've seen, but that's not subsidiarity. That's more of a collective. So societies of superior order must help. Their role is assistive. The higher level authorities are assistive. So they help and support those of the lower order. They ought not to absorb those of the lower order or take over the functions which lower order societies can reasonably and effectively do themselves. You see this also kind of at work in a healthcare setting, where what's the essential relationship, Ms. Reeser? The doctor-patient relationship. No, I lost it. All right. I'm right there with you, Ms. Reeser. I checked out about 15 minutes ago. Out the door, but still here in body. No, the basic relationship is the doctor-patient relationship, and that should not be messed with. That's the lowest level relationship, the most basic relationship, and that should not be messed with, even by, say, an ethics committee or administration, unless there's a need to get involved. For example, the doctor-physician has a question about what ethically to do in a situation, or the doctor or physician is not deemed to be treating the patient equitably or properly, and stuff like that, or nurse or whatever. Then you might need to get involved and have, that's why you have mortality and morbidity seminars. You to constantly, you have a higher level authority, your other colleagues, who then intervene to maybe review, okay, why did this person get so sick? Or why did this person in our hospital die on us? Okay? Otherwise, you're kind of unchecked in a way. Your relationship, the lower level relationship is respected. Higher social entities must not supplant the initiative, freedom, and responsibility of those of a lower order. Because remember, you're dealing with individuals who make up a society, and individuals have rights. Societies don't have rights per se. The individuals that make up the society have rights that are to be respected. They're not supposed to be given rights by their society. That's the principle. That's not how it always works in practice, because rights seem to be given to us and then can be taken away. There are more privileges sometimes than rights. But that's why the individual rights of what the freedom of the person to act responsibly should be respected. Yes, if you want to see what I just told you, what I'm teaching you is basically, you can find it again in the Compendium for the Social Doctrine of the Church, put out by the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, numbers 186 to 187. Okay? This is just a little quote from Pope St. John Paul II, who wrote a social encyclical. The popes have written documents going back from the late 1800s on human society and how human society should be organized according to rational principles, but also moral principles. And these are called social documents. And one of these was commemorating one of those, is document Centesimus Annus. And it's in English, it's called On the 100th Anniversary of Rerum Novarum, which was the first of these social encyclicals in the late 1800s. Rerum Novarum, the first two Latin words of the document. And Centesimus Annus are the first two Latin words of his document. Centesimus Annus, since 100 years, so I think it was a century, it's a century since Rerum Novarum, so he's commemorating. And what does he say? Here again, the principle of subsidiarity must be respected. The community of a higher order should not interfere in the internal life of the community of a lower order. Okay, we got that. Depriving the latter of its functions. But it should support it in case of need and help to coordinate its activity with the activities of the rest of society, always with a view to the common good. Okay. What you got there? Anything good?
Yeah, I got, well, strawberry apple bar.
Ooh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice. Tasty.
Snack time.
Okay, and so I already said this, because society, although a group, is composed of individuals who have individual dignity and rights. But I already said that, so I'll move on. I just threw this in to basically make my point from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but that I can move on from that. I don't need to read that. It basically says the same thing that I just said here. How does this apply to healthcare ethically, or things that you're going to have to deal with? Well, subsidiarity applies, and violations of subsidiarity can apply when higher level entities do step in when they're excuse me, I'm misreading my notes. When higher entities do step in when they're not assistive, when they might be getting in the way. And this could be a case example when insurance companies interfere needlessly in the doctor-patient relationship. They won't pay for something, even though it's something that the physician has determined is medically necessary for the patient. But nope, they just don't want to cover it, don't cover it. And so the whole thing with medical codes with Teos Ojeda is that you got to be creative. You have to be clever. No, it's okay. I told you, I checked out 15 minutes ago myself. You have to be creative, right? You have to learn the medical codes. And, this. I mean, you have to know which kind of code to put it in so that you'll get paid. That's the whole purpose of the medical codes, this whole coding system. I remember I watched a video a couple years ago or something. It was kind of fascinating with this woman. She might have been a nurse, but describing how you had to input medical codes and describing, what's the easiest way and all the ins and outs of it. It was fascinating, but, I'd want to blow my brains out at the end of the day. Not really, so don't call security. But that's what you have to do, because you have to play this game with insurance companies, otherwise they won't pay. So that could be a violation. When doctors join consortia or consortiums, which then micromanage and dictate how many patients a doctor has to see in order to turn a profit. So you're a doctor, you can't make it all on your own, so you join a consortium or a group, a medical group, but then that medical group says, okay, but you got to see X amount of patients every day, otherwise you're not being profitable to the group. So then you have to figure out, how long can I see this person? I talked about my shrink before, a psychiatrist. They're telling me all the paperwork that they have to fill out and all the different questions, some of which are not even related to my condition, might not be related to a psychiatric condition, but the government wants to know. The health insurance company wants to know it. But he said, if I did all this paperwork, I'd see you for like a minute to 30 seconds. That's the only time I could spare for a patient. I couldn't sit and talk with you. So those can get involved with that. Those can be issues of subsidiarity, where you have a higher level authority imposing limits, imposing burdens that are damaging the effectiveness of the lower level authority to do its job. Is universal health care a violation of subsidiarity? Is it government intrusion on local private initiatives? Well, that's a question. Oops. Wait a second. That's a question because we don't have universal health care in this country, and we don't seem to still have not come up with a solution for what to do with our healthcare system. We do have Obamacare, or the American what's it called? The ACA, the American Care Act, but so we have exchanges. We still have exchanges in the healthcare government website, that you can go to and you can get subsidized healthcare. But it's still not the same thing as universal healthcare, because there are still all sorts of co-pays and deductibles that you have to deal with, and Republican Congresses since then have kind of gutted aspects of the American Care Act, so that it doesn't work so much as it was intended to. But is that a violation of subsidiarity? Is universal health care? That's a question that could be asked. Are lower level solutions, for example, private insurance companies, not able to bear the burden of an expensive healthcare system anymore? Is it a point where you could argue that the government does need a higher level, does need to intervene in order to take over, so that healthcare can be given to everybody who needs it, which is really everybody. Everybody needs some sort of health care. Do we need the government to step in to guarantee health care in a way that lower level organizations can't, so that people can fulfill their common purpose and reach their common goals, which is wholeness and health? Oh, okay. I think I reached that. Just one final point, and then I'll end. Whoops, not the magisterium. From the ERD, creating God's image and likeness, the human family shares in the dominion that Christ manifested in his healing ministry. This sharing involves a stewardship over all material creation. I'm quoting the Bible there, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. That should neither abuse nor squander nature's resources. Through science, the human race comes to understand God's wonderful work. And through technology, it must conserve, protect, and perfect nature. So the church is not against science or technology. In harmony with God's purposes. And it's a caveat there. That's a proviso. And it should be in harmony with God's purposes. Healthcare professionals pursue a special calling, vocation, to share in carrying forth God's life-giving and healing work. Humans are called to collaborate with God in his healing ministry through his Son, Jesus. And stewardship over material creation includes using nature's resources to combat and eradicate sickness and health. There's nothing wrong with that. Science is wonderful. It brings us new things. People have been doing it forever. For example, in the ancient world, there are ancient people. They probably didn't know why this worked, but they used the topical application of mold on wounds against infection. They found that applying like moldy bread to infected wounds would kill the wound. But we didn't really know this, or we didn't really fully know this until we got penicillin from mold. We're like, wait a second, they were doing something right. They didn't know why, but they knew that it worked. People also used herbs and honey. Honey is something that's a good thing to rub into a wound. So this is part of our stewardship in using material creation to combat and eradicate sickness and illness. But this also applies to chemicals we find to make drugs and medications. Healing professionals have received a special calling from God to share in his own work of giving life and healing to the sick. So it's more than just, hopefully, a work-a-day job. There's something more going on there. Okie dokie. I will see you next week. Remember quiz number 3. And also that the paper is coming up at the end of the month. I sent you an email. You too, sir. Thank you, Mr. Stravo. So you played Marywood recently?
Yeah,
Did you win?
we tied.
Tied?
Yeah, we tied 2-2 yesterday. With
I scored in the last minute.
Yeah,
Oh, cool.
It was actually insane.
yeah, it was a really nice goal.
Oh, cool.
It was from like outside the 18 off a corner. Our outside back came down. Like he was out at like the circle, and so he snuck down at the top of the 18. Then he put it, and it went just like a missile. It went low, like on the ground the whole time. Went off the left bar, and then
cool.
the bar went in.
Yeah, it was a great.
So what's your record?
Well, in the conference,
we're like 1-1 and 2.
in the conference,
Okay.
One win, one tie.
Okay.
Yeah, but like
Not bad.
It's crazy because like we didn't win anything last year.
Oh, cool.
and we upset Immaculata.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we beat Immaculata.
Yeah, we beat them.
They didn't even want to handshake us at the end.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, they won. And they were undefeated in the conference, so we beat them last week.
Oh, good job, guys.
Yep.
Good to see you. See you next week.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, actually, I think I made it farther than I